Have you ever been so invisible that when someone finally saw you, it felt like a threat instead of a gift? That's exactly what happened to Cassidy Moore on a Tuesday morning when white lilies appeared on her janitor's supply table, and the CEO of the entire building stood frozen in the lobby, staring at them like they'd just destroyed every carefully constructed wall he'd ever built. Aurora Tower in downtown Seattle. 47 floors of glass and ambition, where power was measured in corner offices and six-figure salaries. This is where our shy girl, Cassidy Moore, worked the morning shift, 5 a.m. to noon, mopping floors that important people walked across without ever looking down. At 27, she felt decades older, worn thin by crushing medical bills, abandoned dreams, and the exhausting weight of being nobody. Sebastian Cole, 35, CEO and founder of Cole Meridian, passed through that lobby every morning at exactly 8:15. His fintech company was built on precision control and the ironclad belief that emotions were dangerous liabilities. He noticed market fluctuations, data irregularities, and security vulnerabilities. He never noticed janitors. Cassidy had mastered the art of disappearing. Head-down movements, efficient eyes that never quite connected with anyone else's. There was a stubborn stain in the corner of that lobby floor. Maybe old coffee, maybe shoe polish that refused to come clean, no matter how hard she scrubbed. 2 full years of trying. Some stains she'd learned were permanent. Just like some people were meant to stay invisible, unnoticed, and safe. Her mother once said she had the kindest eyes. But kind eyes didn't pay for dialysis 3 times a week. Kind eyes didn't finish college degrees or change your station in life. Kind eyes just watched from the shadows. The card attached to those elegant flowers held only 2 words: Cassidy Moore. No explanation, no signature. Just her name written by someone who knew she existed. And when Sebastian Cole's gaze shifted from those mysterious flowers to her face lingering 3 full seconds longer than necessary, this shy girl felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not hope, pure terror. Because in her world, being noticed had never led anywhere good. It only meant you were about to lose whatever fragile safety you'd managed to build in the margins. What happens when the one person you've worked so hard to hide from finally sees you? The next morning, Cassidy arrived at 4:45, 15 minutes early to avoid the lobby. Avoid that table. Avoid whatever might be waiting there. The flowers were still there. Wilting slightly, but present proof that Tuesday wasn't a dream. Frank Miller, the building's veteran security guard, sat at his usual post. At 64, he had the weathered face of someone who'd seen every human drama twice. "You planning to take those home?" he asked, nodding toward the arrangement. She shook her head, steering her cart toward the service elevator. "They're probably meant for someone else. Mistakes don't usually include your full legal name." She didn't respond. Frank had this way of speaking simple truths that landed heavy. By 7:30, the building filled with its daily flood of employees. Cassidy moved through her routine 3rd floor, then 2nd, working methodically down. Over 2 years, she'd learned this place's precise rhythm, which executives arrived early, which stumbled in late, which assistants were considerate, and which treated her like an inconvenient ghost. Victoria Shaw, the chief operating officer, firmly belonged to the latter category. 41 impeccable in tailored suits that cost more than Cassidy earned in 3 months. She occupied a corner office on the 32nd floor and possessed a smile that never reached her calculating eyes. This morning, Victoria paused in the lobby. Her sharp gaze landed on the flowers, then swept until it found Cassidy near the back wall, wiping down the coffee station. "What a beautiful arrangement," Victoria announced, voice carrying across the marble floor. "Though they seem rather out of place here, don't they? This area is for service staff. Cassidy felt heat flood her face. I didn't request them. Someone just left. Of course. Victoria's smile sharpened. I'm certain there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. The elevator doors closed behind her, but the damage was delivered. 3 employees now stared at Cassidy with undisguised curiosity. A woman from accounting whispered to her colleague. A man in an expensive suit smirked knowingly. Cassidy grabbed her cart and escaped to the stairwell. At 8:15 exactly, Sebastian Cole entered the building. Cassidy wasn't in the lobby. She was on the second-floor stairwell landing, arms wrapped around her knees. Through the small window, she could see him, tall, dark-haired, moving with absolute confidence. He stopped, looked at the flowers, scanned the lobby with an expression she couldn't decipher. Frank said something to him. Sebastian nodded once, then disappeared into the private executive elevator. Cassidy waited 5 full minutes before returning to work. Wednesday brought more flowers. Pink roses this time with that same simple card, Cassidy Moore. Thursday, white tulips. Friday, a mixed bouquet, so beautiful it hurt to look at. Cassidy stopped opening the cards. Didn't take the flowers home. Just let them accumulate on that table, a growing monument to something she couldn't understand or control. People talked. Not cruelly, most of them, but constantly. The receptionist giggled about secret admirers. Someone from HR mentioned office romance during break. A maintenance worker joked about moving up in the world. Each comment felt like a small, precise cut. They all carried the same assumption that someone like Cassidy, this girl who mopped floors, didn't naturally attract this attention. There had to be a story, an angle, something extraordinary, to justify ordinary kindness directed at an invisible person. Late Friday afternoon, while Cassidy cleaned the executive floor restrooms, Sebastian's assistant appeared. Mr. Cole needs to see you in his office. Cassidy's stomach dropped. Did I do something wrong? He just asked me to find you. The walk to Sebastian's office felt like a death march. Cassidy had never been on the 47th floor except for cleaning, had certainly never been summoned to the massive corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Sebastian was standing when she entered, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. Close the door. She obeyed, heart hammering. The flowers, he said without preamble. Do you know who's sending them? No, sir. Silence stretched. He studied her like a puzzle that refused to make sense. Are you involved with anyone dating someone connected to this company? No, sir. More silence. Then, those deliveries are creating distractions. I need you to contact whoever is sending them and make it stop. Cassidy stared at the carpet. I genuinely don't know who it is. Then find out. His voice remained controlled, but something simmered underneath frustration. This is a professional environment. We can't have... He stopped, started again. Just handle it. Yes, sir. She turned to leave. Cassidy. She froze. You're not in trouble, he said, voice suddenly quieter. I just need to maintain order here. Structure. She nodded and escaped before he could see the tears burning behind her eyes. But what Sebastian couldn't see was that someone else had been watching this entire time, and they had their own reasons for those mysterious flowers. Monday morning arrived draped in Seattle rain that felt personal. Cassidy had spent the weekend at the hospital. Her mother's kidney function had worsened significantly. The nephrologist used words like accelerating decline and limited time. Cassidy nodded through it all, holding her mother's frail hand, frantically calculating how many extra shifts she'd need to cover escalating treatment costs. She'd slept maybe 3 hours total. When she arrived at Aurora Tower, no flowers waited. Relief and disappointment hit simultaneously. Wasn't this what she'd wanted? To disappear back into her safe, invisible routine, Frank glanced up from his newspaper. "You doing all right there?" "Fine," she lied. "Mm-hmm." He'd mastered the art of saying nothing while communicating everything. The morning blurred past in exhaustion. On the 14th floor, she nearly collided with someone emerging from the break room. Victoria Shaw, holding a $12 coffee. "Cassidy, perfect timing. Walk with me." Every muscle went rigid. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria's office was all white furniture and meaningless abstract art. She gestured for Cassidy to sit, then settled behind her glass desk like a judge taking the bench. "HR has brought concerns to my attention. Multiple people report you seem distracted. Last Wednesday, the third-floor break room wasn't properly cleaned. Coffee grounds were left in the sink." Cassidy's mind raced. She didn't remember that. Had she forgotten? "I understand you're dealing with personal difficulties," Victoria continued smoothly. "Your mother's illness must be challenging, but we maintain certain standards. This is a prestigious company, and every employee, regardless of position, must perform at an acceptable level." "I'm so sorry," Cassidy whispered. "It won't happen again." "I hope not. We've been discussing whether this role remains the right fit for you." Victoria leaned back. Some people confuse being noticed with having actual value. Real value lies in measurable contribution and maintaining professional standards. "Do you understand?" Cassidy understood perfectly. She was being reminded of her place. Flowers or no flowers, she remained replaceable. "I understand completely." "Excellent. Consider this a verbal warning. Any further issues, and we'll have a more formal conversation about your future here." Victoria's smile could have cut glass. "You may go." Cassidy made it to the stairwell before the tears came. She collapsed onto the cold concrete, pressing her palms against her eyes, trying to breathe through rising panic. She couldn't lose this job. The insurance, the paycheck, the proximity to the hospital, it was everything. The only thing standing between her mother and complete disaster. Footsteps echoed from above. Cassidy quickly scrubbed her face and stood. Sebastian Cole appeared on the landing heading down. He stopped when he saw her tear-stained face. "Are you—" He hesitated. "Did something just happen?" "No, sir. Just taking a short break." He looked like he wanted to say something else. The silence felt thick. "The flowers stopped coming," he finally said. "Yes, sir." "Did you tell someone to stop sending them?" "I never knew who it was to tell." More silence. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Victoria called you to her office." It wasn't a question. "Just a routine conversation," Cassidy said quietly. "About maintaining standards." Sebastian's expression darkened. "What exactly did she say to you?" "Nothing that wasn't accurate." "Cassidy, I really should get back to work." She moved past him down the stairs, away from his intense gaze. She didn't see him standing motionless for a full minute after hands clenched into fists fighting an internal war. Sebastian had built Cole Meridian from nothing, slept in his car that brutal first year, coded through endless nights on gas station coffee and stubborn refusal to fail. He'd learned early that emotions were expensive luxuries. Trust was dangerous. Caring about people meant giving them power to hurt you. So he'd constructed distance, professional boundaries, an impenetrable fortress where nothing unexpected could reach him. Until this girl with kind eyes started receiving mysterious flowers, and he realized he'd been noticing her for months. The way she hummed while she worked, how she straightened the crooked picture frame outside the elevators. The careful way she arranged lost items so owners could find them. He'd told himself it was merely observation. But when he'd seen those first flowers, something cracked in his emotional walls, something dangerously close to jealousy. When he'd called her to his office and ordered her to make them stop, he'd been lying. What he really wanted to say was, "Who sent these? Why them and not me?" He hadn't intervened with Victoria because he'd convinced himself that protecting Cassidy would make everything worse, would invite gossip that could destroy her security. But standing in that stairwell, seeing tears on her face, Sebastian finally understood that his control had protected no one, least of all her. What Sebastian didn't know was that the truth about those flowers was about to shatter everything he thought he understood about Cassidy, about kindness, and about what it really means to save someone's life. The man was waiting in the lobby when Cassidy finished her shift on Tuesday afternoon. She almost didn't notice him, just another person in business casual scrolling through his phone. But as she pushed her cart toward the service elevator, he stood deliberately. "Cassidy Moore." She stopped. Her heart was already racing. He was around 35 with brown hair and unremarkable features except for his eyes. They held something raw and recognizable. Survived pain. "I'm Daniel Brooks," he said gently. "I'm the person who's been sending you the flowers." Cassidy's mind went blank. She'd imagined a dozen scenarios, mistaken identity, an elaborate prank, even something sinister. Never this. Never someone so normal, so earnest. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Could we talk just for a few minutes right here? In public? I promise I'm not. I just need to tell you something important." They sat on the bench near the entrance. Frank was 20 feet away, close enough to intervene if needed. "You don't remember me," Daniel began. "There's no reason you would. It was 18 months ago. March 14th, around 10 at night at the Westlake Station bus stop." Cassidy tried to place the memory. March, 18 months back. She'd been working brutal double shifts, taking the late bus home. It was pouring rain. Daniel continued, voice thick with emotion. "I was sitting on that bench. You sat next to me. Didn't say anything at first. Then you offered me half your sandwich. Said you'd packed too much for lunch." A vague memory surfaced. A man drenched, shaking. She'd thought he looked cold, hungry. She'd had a turkey sandwich from the convenience store. "We talked for maybe 20 minutes, Daniel said. "You told me about your mother, how you were saving for her treatment. You asked what I did. I lied. Said I was between jobs." He paused, hands trembling. "What I didn't tell you was that I'd just been fired that morning. That my wife had left 3 months earlier and taken our daughter. That I'd written a note that morning and put it in my jacket pocket. That I'd been sitting at that bus stop for 2 hours, trying to decide whether to go home or walk to the bridge." Cassidy's breath caught. "You didn't know any of that." Daniel continued, tears in his eyes. "You just sat with me in the rain, shared your food, talked to me like I was a person worth talking to. When the bus came, you asked if I'd be okay getting home. I said yes. And you said, 'Good. Tomorrow might be better.' It usually is." Tears streamed down Cassidy's face. Such a simple thing to say. "But I got on that bus, went home, threw the note away. The next day I called my sister, started seeing a therapist, eventually found a new job, started rebuilding my life piece by piece." Daniel's smile was watery but genuine. "It took 16 months to track you down. I remembered your name from your badge. Last month I finally found you here." "The flowers," Cassidy managed. "I wanted you to know you were seen, that what you did mattered more than you could imagine, that you saved my life with half a sandwich and 20 minutes of basic kindness." He showed her a photo on his phone. A little girl, maybe 6, grinning with missing front teeth. "That's Emma, my daughter. I see her every other weekend now. She wouldn't have a father today if not for you." Cassidy couldn't speak. "I'm sorry if the flowers caused you trouble," Daniel said sincerely. "I just needed you to know. I don't need anything from you. I just needed to say thank you for saving my life." He started to walk away. "Wait!" Cassidy called. "What do you do now?" Daniel turned back, something sheepish crossing his face. "I'm a program manager at Microsoft. Kind of ironic you work here cleaning offices and the person whose life you saved ended up in tech." He shook his head. The world works in strange ways. After he left, Cassidy sat on that bench for a long time. Frank eventually came over, sat beside her. "You all right?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I was just being kind. I didn't think it would—" "That's the thing about real kindness," Frank said quietly. "You don't do it expecting returns. You do it because that's who you are. But every once in a while you get to see the ripples spread out from one small action." He patted her shoulder. "You're more visible than you think, kid." What Cassidy didn't see was Sebastian Cole standing motionless by the elevator on the mezzanine level above. He'd come down to retrieve a file from his car, had stopped when he saw Cassidy talking to an unfamiliar man, had stayed listening to every word. Sebastian's hands were gripping the railing so hard his knuckles had gone white. He'd spent 18 months passing this girl in lobbies and hallways, seeing her as background scenery, a reliable but unremarkable employee who did her job efficiently and asked for nothing. He'd never considered that she might be the kind of person who sat with strangers in the rain, who shared what little she had, who talked someone back from the edge without even knowing the stakes. He'd built an entire company on the principle that value was measurable, quantifiable, that people were assets or liabilities numbers on spreadsheets. And here was Cassidy Moore earning minimum wage and saving lives with sandwiches and simple kindness. Sebastian walked back to the elevator, pressed the button for the 47th floor, and did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He called his assistant and told her to cancel everything for the rest of the afternoon. Then he sat at his massive desk, staring out at the Seattle skyline, and finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he'd been running from his entire adult life. But there was one more person who'd been watching this entire time, and she wasn't about to let this story have a happy ending without a fight. The security incident happened Thursday morning. Cassidy was cleaning the 23rd floor when she noticed something wrong, a door that should have been locked standing slightly ajar. The server room. She'd cleaned this floor every single weekday for 2 years. That door was always sealed tight, always required a key card for access. She hesitated. This wasn't technically her responsibility. She should just report it and move on. But something Frank had said kept echoing in her mind. Stand straight. She pulled out her phone and called security directly. Then she stood by that door, making absolutely sure no one entered until Frank arrived with 2 IT staff members. What they discovered was a sophisticated corporate espionage attempt. Someone had bypassed the electronic lock and inserted a device designed to skim proprietary data. Another hour, and they would have gained access to Cole Meridian's exclusive trading algorithms. Millions of dollars in intellectual property. Frank looked at Cassidy with something very much like pride. Sharp eye. "I just noticed it was different from usual," she said quietly. By noon, everyone in the building knew. The story spread like wildfire. The janitor, that shy girl nobody paid attention to, had just stopped a major security breach. The quiet woman nobody noticed had saved the entire company. Sebastian called an emergency meeting on the executive floor. Victoria, the head of IT, the head of security, and 3 senior board members. Cassidy wasn't invited, but she was cleaning the adjacent conference room and could hear raised voices bleeding through the wall. Victoria's voice cut through sharply. "This is precisely what I've been warning about for months. Lax security protocols. Inadequate oversight. We need a complete review of all personnel with building access." The janitor stopped it. Someone interrupted. "She's the one who caught what your security measures missed. One lucky observation doesn't negate systemic vulnerabilities." Then Sebastian's voice cold as midwinter. "Where exactly were you when this breach occurred?" Victoria. "Excuse me. You oversee operations, security clearances, access protocols. This breach happened directly on your watch, and it was caught by someone you told me last week was nothing but a distraction." Tense silence. "I've been looking into some things," Sebastian continued, his voice deadly calm. "Interesting discrepancies. Those coffee grounds Cassidy was supposedly written up for the break room security cameras show it wasn't even her floor that day. She wasn't scheduled there. Yet somehow HR received a formal complaint with your signature." Cassidy's hands froze on her cleaning supplies. The flowers that created such a professional distraction. They arrived before business hours, placed in a public area. There's no company policy whatsoever against employees receiving personal deliveries. Yet Cassidy was called into your office and subjected to intimidation. I was maintaining professional standards. You were exercising contempt disguised as management. Sebastian said steel in every word. The investigation into this security breach revealed something else interesting. That access device had been in place for 3 full days. Security footage shows you entering that server room Tuesday afternoon. You didn't report the compromised door. You walked right past it without a second glance. Victoria's voice turned defensive and sharp. "That's absurd. Why would I?" "Because you didn't care enough to notice. Because it wasn't your job to pay attention to details. Because someone in Cassidy's position isn't worth your attention unless you're reminding them of their place in your hierarchy." He paused deliberately. "Real value lies in position." Those were your exact words to her. Let me tell you what real value actually is. It's someone who shows up every single day at 4:45 in the morning and cares enough to notice when something's wrong, even when nobody notices them. You cannot be serious. You're removed from operational oversight effective immediately. HR will discuss the terms of your departure today. Cassidy heard a chair scrape violently back. Quick, angry footsteps. A door slamming hard. Then Sebastian's voice, quieter now but clear. "Get me Cassidy Moore's personnel file, and someone find Frank Miller. I want to know if we have any openings in building security management." Cassidy backed away from the wall, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might break through her chest. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her, to invisible people who mopped floors. But then she remembered Daniel, the flowers, Emma's gap-toothed smile in that photo, the simple truth she'd somehow forgotten along the way. Sometimes kindness echoes back. Sometimes being seen isn't punishment. Sometimes it's just the universe finally paying attention to what was there all along. And sometimes the person who's been terrified of being noticed realizes that being truly seen by the right person changes absolutely everything. Sebastian found her in the stairwell. Of course he did. Cassidy was sitting on the landing between the 23rd and 24th floors, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to process everything she'd just overheard. "May I sit?" He gestured to the step beside her. She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. For a long moment, they just sat there in comfortable silence. Two people in a concrete stairwell separated by everything society said mattered: money, education, power, position, and connected by something those measurements couldn't begin to touch. "You didn't have to do that," Cassidy finally said. "Fire Victoria. Stand up for me like that. I'm just—" "Don't," Sebastian interrupted gently. "Please don't finish that sentence the way you're about to. You don't know what I was going to say. You were going to say you're just something. Just a janitor. Just a nobody. Just someone who doesn't deserve that kind of protection." He turned to look directly at her. "Am I wrong?" She couldn't answer because he was exactly right. "I heard what Daniel told you," Sebastian admitted quietly. "About the bus stop, the sandwich, what you did without even knowing the impact you were having." He shook his head slowly. "I've spent 15 years building a company worth $500 million. I employ 300 people across 4 offices. I've been on the cover of Forbes magazine. And I've never once saved anyone's life with basic human kindness the way you did. That's not fair. You create jobs, you provide. I create value. There's a profound difference." He paused, gathering courage. "Can I tell you something? For the past 6 months, every morning at 8:15, I've looked forward to seeing you in that lobby. I told myself I was just checking security, making sure operations were running smoothly. But really, I was looking for you. The way you hummed while you worked. How you always straightened that crooked picture frame by the elevators. How you smiled at Frank even when you looked completely exhausted." Cassidy's breath caught in her throat. "I told you to make the flowers stop because I was jealous." Sebastian continued, his voice raw with honesty. "Not as a CEO worried about workplace disruptions. As a man who'd spent so many years protecting himself from feeling anything that when I finally did feel something, I had no idea how to handle it." "Sebastian, I'm not asking you to respond to any of that. I'm not asking for anything in return." He stood up, offered her his hand. "But I am asking if maybe someday soon after work, you'd let me buy you dinner. Not as a CEO, not as an employee. Just as two people who both understand what it's like to be afraid of being truly seen." Cassidy looked at his outstretched hand. Thought about all the years she'd spent making herself small, invisible, safe in the shadows. Then she thought about Daniel, about Emma's smile, about the inspirational truth that her life had helped save another without her even trying. She took Sebastian's hand and let him help her stand. "I'd like that very much," she said quietly. "But I need you to promise me something first. Anything. Don't promote me. Don't change my job. I genuinely like mopping floors. I like the quiet, the solitude, the routine. I just want to be seen as a person, not rescued as some kind of charity project." Sebastian smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes for maybe the first time since she'd known him. "Deal!" And that's when this shy girl finally realized being invisible had never kept her safe. It had only kept her small. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning, Sebastian entered the lobby at exactly 8:15. "Good morning, Cassidy." She looked up from mopping, no longer afraid to meet his eyes directly. "Good morning." No flowers, no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just recognition, just presence, just two people seeing each other clearly. That stubborn stain in the corner of the lobby floor, it was finally gone. Turned out it just needed the right combination of patience, persistence, and being willing to see what was really there beneath the surface. Frank watched from his security desk and smiled knowingly. "You don't need the whole world to see you," he'd told her weeks ago. "Just the right person, at the right time." Cassidy had learned he was right about something else, too. Real safety isn't invisibility. It's knowing that when you finally let yourself be seen, truly seen, you won't disappear. You'll just finally be.